The metal chains made a terrible sound. Clink, clink, clink. They wrapped around the old man's wrists like angry snakes. Every step he took, the chains sang their cold song. "Move faster, old man," Officer Daniels shouted. He pushed the veteran's shoulder hard. Too hard. The old man stumbled but didn't fall. His worn boots scraped against the courthouse steps. His clothes were dirty and torn. His beard was long and gray, tangled like winter branches. But his eyes were different. They were sharp, clear. They held secrets. On his chest, 5 medals caught the morning sunlight. They sparkled like tiny stars, even though everything else about him looked broken. "Look at this fool," Officer Daniels laughed, "wearing fake medals. Probably found them in a trash can." Officer Myers joined the laughter. "Yeah, pretending to be a soldier. Pathetic." The old man's jaw tightened. His hands became fists inside the chains. But he said nothing. Not yet. People on the street stopped to stare. A woman covered a child's eyes. A man shook his head in disgust. A teenager pointed and whispered to his friend. "That's the thief," someone said. "Homeless people always stealing," another voice added. The old man heard every word. Each one was like a tiny knife. But he kept walking. One foot, then the other. The medals on his chest bounced with each step, catching light, as if trying to speak when he could not. Inside the courthouse, the air felt heavy. It smelled like old wood and broken promises. The hallway stretched long and dark. Their footsteps echoed loud. Click, clack, click, clack, and always the chains. Clink, clink, clink. "Courtroom 3, Officer Daniels said, pushing open 2 large wooden doors. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled. People whispered to each other like buzzing bees. When the old man shuffled in with his chains, the whispers grew louder. "Is that him? What did he steal? Look how dirty he is." The officers marched him to a wooden table at the front. They made him sit in a hard chair. The chains rattled as he settled down. Across from him sat a lawyer in a crisp suit who wouldn't look at him. The lawyer's nose wrinkled like he smelled something bad. Behind the tall judge's bench, everything was empty, waiting. The American flag hung in the corner, proud and still. A woman in the front row leaned to her husband. "I heard he stole from the corner store. Again." "How many times is that?" The husband whispered back. "5th time this year," she said, shaking her head. The old man stared straight ahead. His hands rested on the table. The medals on his chest rose and fell with his breathing. A side door opened. "All rise," a bailiff called out. Everyone stood. Chairs scraped. Papers rustled. The judge walked in, wearing a long black robe. He was younger than most judges, maybe 45. His face was serious. His steps were confident. He sat down in his tall leather chair. "You may be seated," he said. Everyone sat. The room became quiet. So quiet you could hear the clock on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. The bailiff read from a paper. "Case number 4782. The People versus..." He paused, squinting at the name, John Carter. The judge looked down at his papers. He hadn't looked at the old man yet. "What are the charges?" A prosecutor stood up. She was tall with red hair pulled back tight. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with theft in the 3rd degree. He stole items from Morrison's corner store on 5th Street. "What items?" the judge asked, still not looking up. "Bread and milk, Your Honor." Someone in the back of the courtroom snickered. Then another person. Soon, quiet laughter rippled through the crowd like a mean wind. The judge's eyes lifted for the first time. They landed on the old man. For just a moment, something flickered across the judge's face. Confusion? Recognition? It passed too quickly to tell. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, "how do you plead?" The old man stood slowly. The chains clinked. The room went silent again. He straightened his back. Suddenly, he didn't look quite so broken. He looked like a soldier standing at attention. "Not guilty, Your Honor." More laughter from the crowd. Louder this time. The prosecutor smiled. Your Honor, this is Mr. Carter's fifth offense this year. The store owner has video footage. We have witnesses. He was caught red-handed holding the stolen items. I was hungry, the old man said. His voice was rough like gravel, but steady, strong. That's no excuse for breaking the law. The prosecutor shot back. I wasn't making an excuse, the old man said. I was stating a fact. The judge held up his hand. Mr. Carter, do you have legal representation? No, sir. Your Honor, the prosecutor continued. Given Mr. Carter's history and his refusal to seek help from proper channels, we recommend 60 days in county jail. Gasps filled the courtroom, but also nods. Many people were nodding. The old man's fingers touched the medals on his chest, one by one, gently, like he was greeting old friends. Your Honor, he said quietly. May I speak? The judge leaned back in his chair. He studied the old man carefully now. His eyes moved from the dirty clothes to the tangled beard of the medals that shined so bright. Go ahead, Mr. Carter. The old man took a deep breath. These medals, he said, lifting his chained hands to point at his chest. I earned every single one of them. Officer Daniels laughed from where he stood by the wall. Sure you did, old man. But the old man kept talking. His voice grew stronger. I didn't find them in trash cans. I didn't buy them at garage sales. I earned them with blood and sweat and tears. I earned them watching friends die. I earned them in places most people can't even find on a map. The courtroom grew quiet again. But this time, it was a different kind of quiet. This quiet had teeth. These medals are proof, the old man continued. Proof that I served. Proof that I mattered. Proof that once, a long time ago, people thanked me instead of laughing at me. The judge's face had gone pale. His hands gripped the edge of his desk. His eyes were locked on the medals. One medal in particular. A silver star that caught the light just right. The old man wasn't finished. My name is Sergeant John Carter, United States Army. I served 20 years. I fought in the Gulf. I fought in Bosnia. I fought in Afghanistan. And yes, Your Honor, I stole bread and milk. Because I was hungry. Because I'm old. Because I'm tired. Because the country I gave everything to has forgotten my name. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. But his voice never wavered. The judge stood up suddenly. His chair rolled backward and hit the wall with a bang. Everyone jumped. What did you say your name was? The judge whispered. Sergeant John Carter, sir. The judge's hands were shaking. His face had gone from pale to white. He stared at the old man like he was seeing a ghost. Carter, he repeated. John Carter. Sergeant. Yes, sir. The courtroom held its breath. The clock on the wall seemed to stop. Tick, tick, tick. The judge's eyes were wide now. Vet, full of something that looked like lightning and thunder and sunshine all mixed together. Bosnia, the judge said, his voice cracking. 2001, outside Sarajevo. The old man's eyes went wide, too. Yes, sir. There was an ambush, the judge continued, stepping down from his bench. An ambush at a checkpoint. I remember, the old man whispered. And suddenly, everyone in that courtroom knew. Something big was about to happen. Something that would change everything. The judge walked down from his bench. Each step felt like an earthquake. The entire courtroom watched in shock. Judges never left their benches during a trial. Never. But Judge Michael Harrison kept walking. His black robe swished with each step. His eyes never left the old man's face. Your Honor? The prosecutor said, confused. Is everything all right? The judge didn't answer her. He stopped right in front of the old man, right in front of Sergeant John Carter. The checkpoint, Judge Harrison whispered. There were 6 of us, young soldiers, fresh, scared. The old man nodded slowly. Tears filled his eyes now, too. I was the sergeant in charge that day. You were older than the rest of us, the judge continued. His voice shook. Maybe 40. We thought you were ancient. A small smile touched the old man's cracked lips. I was ancient. At least I felt that way. The courtroom was frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. They all watched this strange moment between the judge and the homeless man. "What's happening?" A woman whispered to her husband. "Sure," he said. "Just listen." Judge Harrison's hands covered his face. When he pulled them away, tears streamed down his cheeks. I was Private Harrison back then, 19 years old, stupid and scared and so young. "I remember," Sergeant Carter said softly. "You had freckles, red hair. You reminded me of my son. We were guarding that checkpoint," the judge said, his voice growing stronger. "Nothing had happened for weeks. We thought it was safe. We got lazy." The old man nodded. "You started taking off your helmets, playing cards, joking around. Then they came," the judge whispered. "Then they came," the sergeant repeated. For a moment, neither man spoke. The memory hung between them like a thick fog, heavy, dark, dangerous. The judge turned to face the courtroom. "Let me tell you what happened," he said loudly. "Let me tell you about Sergeant John Carter." Everyone leaned forward. The prosecutor sat down, forgotten. The officers by the wall stopped sneering. Even the clock seemed to listen. It was April 15th, 2001. Judge Harrison began. Bosnia. Outside Sarajevo. We were young soldiers guarding a checkpoint on a dusty road. 6 of us. It had been quiet for so long that we stopped being careful. He pointed at the sergeant. But not him. Sergeant Carter never stopped being careful. He kept telling us to stay alert, to keep our helmets on, to watch the hills. We thought he was paranoid, old and paranoid. The judge's voice cracked. We were so stupid. "You were young," the sergeant said gently. "Young soldiers make mistakes. I made plenty when I was 19. That afternoon," the judge continued, "we heard engines, big trucks coming down the road." Sergeant Carter's face changed. He knew. Somehow he knew. The old man touched his medals again. One in particular, a Bronze Star. I saw dust clouds from 3 directions. Too many vehicles moving too fast. It didn't feel right. He yelled at us. The judge said he screamed at us to take cover, to grab our weapons, to get ready. But we were slow, too slow. The courtroom was so quiet now that you could hear people's hearts beating. "The trucks came around the bend," Judge Harrison said, "and they started shooting. Machine guns, rifles, everything. The world exploded. Bullets were everywhere, like angry bees made of metal." A woman in the crowd gasped. Her hand covered her mouth. We dove behind concrete barriers. The judge continued, "But I was the slowest. I tripped over my own feet. I fell in the open, right in the middle of the road. Bullets hit the ground all around me. I was going to die." Tears poured down his face now. He didn't try to hide them. Then Sergeant Carter ran out. The judge said, his voice rising. He ran into the open, into the bullets, into certain death. He grabbed me by my vest and dragged me behind cover. A bullet hit his shoulder. Another hit his leg. But he didn't stop. He kept dragging me until I was safe. The sergeant touched his right shoulder, even through his dirty shirt. You could see he still moved it strangely, like it never healed quite right. Then he picked up a machine gun. The judge said, almost shouting now, and he fired back. He held them off while we got organized, while we called for help. He saved all 6 of us that day. All 6. We all went home to our families because of him. The courtroom erupted. People talked all at once. Some cried. Some stood up. The prosecutor's mouth hung open in shock. "Order," the bailiff called. But even he was crying. Judge Harrison walked closer to the sergeant. He knelt down, right there in front of everyone. The judge knelt before the homeless man in chains. "You took 2 bullets for me," the judge whispered. "You carried me to safety. You called me son. You told me I was brave, even though we both knew I wasn't. You told me to write to my mother, to tell her I loved her, because you said you might not get another chance." The sergeant's chains rattled as he reached out with both hands. He touched the judge's head gently, like a father touching his child. You did right to her, didn't you? The sergeant asked. Every week, the judge said, sobbing now. Every single week until she died last year. Because of you. Good, the sergeant said, smiling through his tears. That's good. The judge stood up. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked at the prosecutor, at the officers, at every single person in that courtroom. This man, he said, pointing at Sergeant Carter, is a hero, a real hero, not the kind you see in movies, the kind that bleeds, the kind that hurts, the kind that saves lives and then gets forgotten. Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably. His face was red. Those medals, the judge continued, his voice like thunder now, are not fake. That Bronze Star, he earned it pulling me and another soldier from a burning vehicle. That Purple Heart, he earned it taking bullets meant for kids like me. That Silver Star, he earned it holding off 30 enemy fighters while we evacuated wounded. The judge pointed at each medal. He knew them all. He had studied them while the sergeant spoke. 20 years he served, Judge Harrison said. 20 years protecting people who would one day call him a thief. 20 years bleeding for a country that would one day chain him up for stealing bread. The prosecutor stood up slowly. Your Honor, I didn't know. Nobody knows, the sergeant said quietly. Nobody asks. They see a homeless man. Dirty, smelly, crazy, maybe. They don't see the soldier. They don't see the hero. They just see the problem they want to go away. Judge Harrison turned to look at the sergeant. Really look at him. What happened to you? After the war? After all that service? The sergeant's shoulders sagged. I came home. My wife had left. Took my son. I tried to work, but the pain... He touched his shoulder again. The nightmares. The sounds. Everything made me jump. Made me remember. I couldn't hold a job. Lost my apartment. Then I was on the street. Didn't the VA help? Someone in the crowd asked. The sergeant laughed, but it was a sad laugh. I tried. Forms. Appointments. Waiting lists. Everything takes so long. I'd show up at the wrong time or the wrong place. My mind doesn't work like it used to. The war took pieces of it. Left holes. I survived bullets, he continued, his voice breaking. But I couldn't survive paperwork. Isn't that funny? 20 years in combat, and paperwork defeated me. Nobody laughed. Not even a little bit. Judge Harrison's hands became fists. How long have you been on the streets? 15 years, give or take. You lose track of time out there. Days blend together. Seasons change. You just try to stay warm. Try to find food. Try to remember why you're still alive. And the bread? The judge asked softly. The milk? I was hungry, the sergeant said simply. So, hungry it hurt. I knew stealing was wrong. I knew I'd probably get caught. But Your Honor, when your stomach feels like it's eating itself, you stop thinking clearly. You just act. The judge closed his eyes. When he opened them, they burned with something fierce, something powerful. This trial, he said, his voice ringing through the courtroom, is over. The judge's words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. This trial is over. The prosecutor stood up quickly. Your Honor, we haven't heard all the evidence. Sit down, Judge Harrison said. His voice wasn't angry. It was something else. Something stronger than anger. It was justice. The prosecutor sat. Judge Harrison walked back to his bench, but he didn't sit in his tall chair. He stood beside it, one hand resting on the wood. He looked at every person in that courtroom, one by one, making sure they all saw him, making sure they all understood. Let me tell you about justice, he began. Real justice. Not the kind written in law books. The kind that lives in here. He touched his chest, right over his heart. The courtroom was silent, waiting. This man, Judge Harrison pointed at Sergeant Carter, stole bread and milk. The evidence is clear. He admits it. Under the law, he is guilty. Some people nodded. Officer Daniels crossed his arms, looking satisfied. But, the judge continued, his voice rising, what about the other debt? The one this courtroom hasn't talked about. Confusion spread across faces. What other debt? Sergeant Carter gave his country 20 years. Judge Harrison said. He gave his health, his shoulder, his leg, his peace of mind. He gave up sleeping without nightmares. He gave up quiet moments without fear. He gave pieces of his soul that he will never get back. The judge's voice grew louder, stronger. He gave all of that so we could sit here safely, so we could sleep peacefully, so we could raise our children without bombs falling from the sky. What did he ask for in return? Nobody answered. The silence was heavy. Nothing. The judge said. He asked for nothing, but we owed him everything. And how did we repay him? We let him sleep on cold streets. We let him starve. We let him become invisible. We forgot his name. Tears streamed down faces all over the courtroom now. The woman who had covered her child's eyes earlier was sobbing. The teenager who had pointed and whispered stared at his shoes, ashamed. So yes, Judge Harrison said, Sergeant Carter owes society $2.37 for bread and milk. But society, we owe him a debt that can never be repaid. Not with money, not with medals, not with anything. He turned to face the sergeant directly. Case dismissed. The prosecutor's mouth opened, but no words came out. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am ordering that all charges be permanently expunged from Sergeant Carter's record. All of them. Every single arrest. Gone. The bailiff looked shocked. Your Honor, that's highly irregular. I don't care, Judge Harrison said firmly. This man earned the right to be irregular. Officer Daniels. The officer straightened up. His smug smile was long gone. Yes, Your Honor? Take those chains off him. Now. Officer Daniels rushed forward. His hands shook as he pulled out his keys. The chains fell away from the sergeant's wrists with a final clink. They hit the floor like dead snakes. Sergeant Carter rubbed his wrists. Red marks showed where the metal had bitten his skin. He stared at his free hands like he'd forgotten what they looked like. Judge Harrison came down from his bench again. He walked right up to the sergeant. For a long moment, the two men just looked at each other. The boy who was saved, the man who saved him. Years had changed their faces, but not their hearts. Then Judge Harrison did something no one expected. He hugged him. The judge wrapped his arms around the dirty, smelly, homeless veteran and held him tight. And Sergeant John Carter, who had been strong through bullets and pain and 15 years of cold streets, finally broke. He sobbed. Deep, shaking sob that came from somewhere far down in his soul. All the years of being invisible, all the nights of being cold, all the hunger, all the shame, it poured out of him like a river that had been dammed up too long. I'm sorry, Judge Harrison whispered. I'm so sorry we forgot you. I'm sorry I forgot you. You didn't forget, the sergeant said through his tears. You couldn't have known. I should have looked harder, the judge said. I should have searched. I should have found you. They held each other while the whole courtroom watched. Some people clapped. Then more people. Soon everyone was standing, applauding. Even the prosecutor. Even Officer Daniels, though his face was red with shame. When they finally pulled apart, Judge Harrison kept one hand on the sergeant's shoulder. The good shoulder. You're not going back to the streets, the judge said. It wasn't a question. It was a fact. I don't have anywhere else to go, the sergeant said quietly. Yes, you do. Judge Harrison smiled. You're coming home with me. My house has a guest room. It has hot showers, hot food, a warm bed, and it's yours for as long as you need it. The sergeant's eyes went wide. Your Honor, I couldn't. Michael, the judge said, my name is Michael, and yes, you can. You saved my life. The least I can do is share my home. But your family will be honored to meet you, Michael said firmly. My wife, my 2 daughters. They've heard stories about the sergeant who saved their daddy. They'll be thrilled. Fresh tears rolled down the sergeant's weathered face. But these tears were different. These tears were happy. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Say yes, Michael said. Say you'll let us help you. Say you'll let us try to repay a debt we can never really repay. Sergeant Carter looked around the courtroom at all the faces watching him. Some smiled, some cried, some nodded encouragement. These were the same people who had laughed at him just minutes ago, but now they saw him, really saw him. "Yes," he said finally. "Yes, I'll go home with you." The courtroom erupted again. More applause, more cheers. People stood and clapped until their hands hurt. Michael turned to the bailiff. "Please contact the VA immediately. I want Sergeant Carter enrolled in every program available. Medical care, mental health services, housing assistance, everything. And I'll personally handle any paperwork that comes up." "Right away, Your Honor," the bailiff said, writing notes furiously. Michael looked at Officer Daniels. "Officer, I want you to personally deliver an apology to Sergeant Carter. A real one." Officer Daniels' face went pale, but he stepped forward. He stood in front of the sergeant. "Sir," he began, his voice shaky, "I am sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel. I should have asked your story instead of assuming. I should have seen your medals and wondered instead of mocking. I am truly, deeply sorry." The sergeant studied him for a moment. Then he held out his hand. "Apology accepted, son. We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them." Officer Daniels shook his hand gratefully, tears in his eyes. Michael addressed the whole courtroom. "Let this be a lesson to all of us. Every homeless person you pass on the street has a story, has a history, has value. Maybe they're not all war heroes, but they're all human. They all deserve dignity. They all deserve to be seen." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We can do better. We must do better. Because next time, it might be one of us, one of our family members, one of our friends. Life can change in a heartbeat. And when it does, we should hope someone remembers our name, remembers our worth, remembers our humanity." The courtroom buzzed with agreement. People nodded, whispered, made promises to themselves to be kinder, to look closer, to remember. Michael turned back to Sergeant Carter. "Ready to go home?" The sergeant looked down at his dirty clothes, his broken boots. "I'm not very presentable." "You're perfect," Michael said. "You're a hero, and heroes don't need to be presentable. They just need to be honored." Together, they walked toward the courtroom doors. Side by side, the judge in his black robe, the sergeant in his tattered clothes with his shining medals. As they passed, people reached out, touching the sergeant's arm, squeezing his hand, thanking him, apologizing, seeing him. At the door, Sergeant Carter stopped. He turned back to look at the courtroom one last time, at all these strangers who now knew his name, who now knew his story. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for listening." Then they walked out together into the bright sunshine. The doors closed behind them with a soft click. Outside, the world was the same. Cars drove by. People hurried past. The city noise hummed and buzzed. But for Sergeant John Carter, everything was different. Everything was new. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer forgotten. He was no longer alone. He was going home. Michael's car was parked nearby, a nice silver sedan. Michael opened the passenger door. "Your chariot awaits," he said with a smile. The sergeant hesitated at the car door. His hand touched the medals on his chest one more time. The bronze star, the purple heart, the silver star, each one a memory, each one a story, each one proof that he had mattered. "I earned these," he said softly. "I know," Michael said. "Everyone knows now." Sergeant Carter climbed into the car. The seat was soft, comfortable, clean. It had been so long since he'd sat in a car. The door closed with a solid thunk. Michael got in the driver's side. He started the engine. Classical music played softly from the radio. "We'll get you cleaned up, federal rested. Then tomorrow we'll start making calls. Getting you the help you deserve. Getting you back on your feet." "I don't know how to thank you," the sergeant said. Michael put the car in drive. "You already did, 24 years ago, in Bosnia, when you ran into bullets to save a stupid kid with freckles." He pulled out into traffic. The courthouse grew smaller in the mirror behind them. "Besides," Michael added with a grin, "my daughters have been begging for a grandpa. You're going to be very popular in my house." The sergeant laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from joy instead of bitterness. "I always wanted grandkids." "Well, now you've got two," Michael said. "Emma is 7. Sophie is 10. And they're both going to love hearing your stories." As they drove through the city, Sergeant John Carter watched the world pass by his window, the same streets he'd walked as an invisible man. But now, everything looked different, brighter, fuller of hope, because someone had remembered his name. Someone had seen his medals for what they really were, proof of sacrifice, courage, and love. And someone had said the 3 most beautiful words in the world. "Let's go home." The car turned a corner and disappeared into the afternoon sun. Behind them, the courthouse stood tall and proud. Inside, people were still talking about what they'd witnessed, about justice, about mercy, about remembering. And in homes across the city, people would tell this story to their children, about a homeless man who turned out to be a hero, about a judge who remembered a debt, about how one moment of recognition can change everything. The medals on Sergeant Carter's chest caught the sunlight streaming through the car window. They sparkled like tiny stars, like hope, like proof that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes to those who've earned the right to see it. And somewhere in heaven, all the soldiers who served with John Carter smiled, because their brother, their sergeant, had finally found his way home. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button below. Share it with someone who needs to remember that every person has a story worth hearing. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us what it means to be human. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones we walk right past. Let's all commit to seeing them, to honoring them, to remembering their names. Drop a comment below. Have you ever met someone whose story surprised you? Tell us about it. He paused, letting his words sink in. We can do better. We must do better. Because next time, it might be one of us, one of our family members, one of our friends. Life can change in a heartbeat. And when it does, we should hope someone remembers our name, remembers our worth, remembers our humanity. The courtroom buzzed with agreement. People nodded, whispered, made promises to themselves to be kinder, to look closer, to remember. Michael turned back to Sergeant Carter. "Ready to go home?" The sergeant looked down at his dirty clothes, his broken boots. "I'm not very presentable." "You're perfect," Michael said. "You're a hero, and heroes don't need to be presentable. They just need to be honored." Together, they walked toward the courtroom doors. Side by side, the judge in his black robe, the sergeant in his tattered clothes with his shining medals. As they passed, people reached out, touching the sergeant's arm, squeezing his hand, thanking him, apologizing, seeing him. At the door, Sergeant Carter stopped. He turned back to look at the courtroom one last time, at all these strangers who now knew his name, who now knew his story. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for listening." Then they walked out together into the bright sunshine. The doors closed behind them with a soft click. Outside, the world was the same. Cars drove by. People hurried past. The city noise hummed and buzzed. But for Sergeant John Carter, everything was different. Everything was new. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer forgotten. He was no longer alone. He was going home. Michael's car was parked nearby, a nice silver sedan. Michael opened the passenger door. "Your chariot awaits," he said with a smile. The sergeant hesitated at the car door. His hand touched the medals on his chest one more time. The bronze star, the purple heart, the silver star. Each one a memory, each one a story, each one proof that he had mattered. "I earned these," he said softly. "I know," Michael said. "Everyone knows now." Sergeant Carter climbed into the car. The seat was soft, comfortable, clean. It had been so long since he'd sat in a car. The door closed with a solid thunk. Michael got in the driver's side. He started the engine. Classical music played softly from the radio. "We'll get you cleaned up. Federal rested. Then tomorrow we'll start making calls, getting you the help you deserve, getting you back on your feet. I don't know how to thank you, the sergeant said. Michael put the car in drive. You already did, 24 years ago, in Bosnia, when you ran into bullets to save a stupid kid with freckles. He pulled out into traffic. The courthouse grew smaller in the mirror behind him. Besides, Michael added with a grin, my daughters have been begging for a grandpa. You're going to be very popular in my house. The sergeant laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from joy instead of bitterness. I always wanted grandkids. Well, now you've got 2, Michael said. Emma is 7. Sophie is 10. And they're both going to love hearing your stories. As they drove through the city, Sergeant John Carter watched the world pass by his window, the same streets he'd walked as an invisible man. But now, everything looked different, brighter, fuller of hope, because someone had remembered his name. Someone had seen his medals for what they really were, proof of sacrifice, courage, and love. And someone had said the 3 most beautiful words in the world. Let's go home. The car turned a corner and disappeared into the afternoon sun. Behind them, the courthouse stood tall and proud. Inside, people were still talking about what they'd witnessed, about justice, about mercy, about remembering. And in homes across the city, people would tell this story to their children, about a homeless man who turned out to be a hero, about a judge who remembered a debt, about how one moment of recognition can change everything. The medals on Sergeant Carter's chest caught the sunlight streaming through the car window. They sparkled like tiny stars, like hope, like proof that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes to those who've earned the right to see it. And somewhere in heaven, all the soldiers who served with John Carter smiled, because their brother, their sergeant, had finally found his way home. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button below. Share it with someone who needs to remember that every person has a story worth hearing. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us what it means to be human. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones we walk right past. Let's all commit to seeing them, to honoring them, to remembering their names. Drop a comment below. Have you ever met someone whose story surprised you? Tell us about it.